Do you have what it takes to survive the winter? But more importantly, are you able to work together with other players to make sure the community survives? Because it's time for you to push your luck gathering resources to meet your community's needs in Wolves, which was designed by Connor Alexander and published by Coyote and Crow, who helped sponsor this video. Hi everybody, my name is Nick Murphy of the Brothers Murph, and we are here with Board Game Geek. Well, we've got to work together to survive in the world of Coyote and Crow, so let's get this game down to the table to learn how to play Wolves. Wolves is a semi-cooperative community survival board game for 3 to 6 players, where each player will take on the role of a leader of a community set in an agrarian society. Your goal is to supply your own community with sufficient resources and help your neighbors to do so as well. Throughout the game, you'll gather and gift resources to ensure every player's community needs are met, because if any player fails to meet their community needs, all players lose the game. But if everyone makes it through winter, the player who gained the most status awards will be elected chief of all the communities, and they'll be granted an additional victory. But before we start gathering resources and competing for statuses, let's go over the setup.
To begin, place the status board within reach of all players. Place the turn marker on turn 1 for a 3 to 4 player game, turn 2 for a 5 player game, and turn 3 for a 6 player game. Place the status award and resource tokens near the board. Place the knowledge cards face up near the board and stacks by type. Next, take the 9 availability cards, shuffle them, and place them face down in a deck next to the status board. Then take a number of status rank tokens equal to the number of players starting with 1 and going up and placing them near the status board. Any remaining status rank tokens won't be used, so you can return them to the box. Each player should take a community mat along with the matching status marker, player deck, and one of each of the 3 community needs tokens. Place the status marker on the 0 space in the center of the status board. Place the community needs tokens near your community mat, and place your player deck on the player deck location on your community mat. If you're playing a 6-player game, each player should also start with 1 resource token of each type in their reserve. And in a 3 or 4-player game, it's recommended that you start with a mix of communities that have a variety of resource focuses. Now you're ready to help your community survive. Wolves is played over a series of up to 8 turns, and during the game you must supply your own community with sufficient resources and help your neighbors to do so as well. If a player cannot meet their community's needs at the end of a turn, the game ends immediately and all players lose. However, if everyone makes it through to the end of turn 8, then all players survive for a collective victory. And if one leader has more status awards than any other player, they are elected chief of all communities and win an additional victory. Each turn has 6 steps you'll play through: availability, gathering, conservation bonus, needs, gifting, and reconciling. Some steps can be played simultaneously, while others are played in status rank order. At the beginning of the game, players won't have a status rank order, but by step 2 of the first turn, all players will have a status rank token and will continue to have one throughout the game. Your status in Wolves represents the prestige, honor, and obligations that come with being seen as prosperous and skilled. Your status rank number represents how everyone is viewed by the communities in relation to each other. 1 is always the highest status, and the status ranks descend as you go higher in token order. So whenever a step calls for something to be in status rank order, you'll always start with 1, and then 2, and then 3, and so on. But don't get too comfy. Status rank order can change every turn, and it often does. Let's take a closer look at each of the 6 steps so you can understand the flow of a turn in Wolves. In step 1, availability, players will simultaneously remove cards from their player decks based on the availability modifier shown below the turn number on the status board. One player draws the indicated number of cards from the top of the availability deck, and then all players remove the matching number and types of cards from their player decks, returning them to the game box. Note that in the first few turns you will not have to remove any cards. In turn 8, instead of turning over cards from the availability deck, shuffle your player deck and then turn over cards until you've revealed 7 non-leader cards. You will then return all of those cards to the box and return any leader cards you revealed back to your deck, and then reshuffle your deck. In step 2, gathering, each player simultaneously shuffles their player deck and starts drawing cards one at a time until they're ready to stop. After each draw, if it's a leader card, place it face up in front of you into the leader cards area on your community mat, and if it's any other card, add it to your hand. Before drawing your next card, decide whether or not you want to stop, because you'll want to avoid drawing your 3rd leader. If you want to stop, place your hand of cards face down in front of you to indicate to the other players that you've finished drawing and that you may not start drawing cards again once you stopped. If you push your luck and you end up drawing your 3rd leader card, you've overstretched your resources and you must announce to the table that you overstretched, and at that point you may not draw any more cards. After you announce that you've overstretched, return the 3 leader cards to the top of your deck face up to show that you've overstretched. Not only will you not be able to use those leader cards for the remainder of this turn, but next turn you will skip this step 2, entirely, meaning that you'll have to rely on gifts and reserves to meet your needs. During the gathering step, you must draw at least one card, but you can stop at any time after your first, so be careful. Your goal is to draw at least your minimum community needs of 3 of each resource. Your leader cards act as wild resources and may be used in place of any other resource. Forest cards don't count against you, but they don't have any direct value. It's also worth mentioning that during this step, the gathering step, players should keep the cards in their hands secret from one another. You should not tell anyone how many resources you actually have. On turn 1 only, once all players have finished drawing, you'll need to assign the status rank tokens. The highest rank token, number 1, goes to the player who has the fewest leader cards face up. Ties are broken by the total cards each player has in their hand, with the player with the most cards receiving the higher status. If there's still a tie, the older player receives the higher status. All players should receive a status rank token, and this indicates your initial status rank order. Let's move on to step 3, conservation bonus, which is performed in status rank order. Each player gains 5 status on the status track for each leader card fewer than 2 that they have face up on their community mat. Status markers cannot share the same space, so if a marker would stop on the same space as another, move it back 1 space. In step 4, needs, it's time to start allocating the resources you gathered. First, your people need their bare necessities. In status rank order, each player must pay 3 of each resource, fish, bison, and corn, to meet their community's needs. You can use resource cards in your hand, resource tokens, or face-up leader cards as wild resources, which can act as any resource. If you spend resource tokens from your reserve, simply return them to the pile at the center of the table. If you use cards, return them from your hand to the player deck, and any leader cards from your player mat to your player deck. You may freely mix and match between cards and tokens in any way you'd like for each resource category, but make sure you show the other players the cards and tokens that you're using as you go. If you can't meet a particular resource need, stack any cards or tokens in the matching location on your player mat to show what portion of the needs you've completed. For example, if you can't meet your 3 fish needs, you might have 1 leader card and 1 fish reserve token stacked on the fish location of your community mat. Then place a matching community needs token in the slot to show other players that you have an unmet need. Unmet needs are public knowledge, and everyone should know when a player is short on a resource and by how much. If you have any unmet needs, have no fear, because I'm about to tell you about step 5, which is gifting. In this step, players can freely give resources to those in need. In status rank order, each player may offer gifts to other players one at a time. You may offer a gift to each player in any order, however, a player is not obligated to offer any gifts. The gift may consist of any combination or number of cards from their hands, leader cards, or resource tokens. There's no negotiation or bartering, and players may not reveal what's in their hands or ask for specific gifts, outside of noting what needs they have that have not been met. The gifting player simply states what the gift is. Would you like 3 fish and 1 corn? If the gifting player has a higher status rank than the recipient can take any portion of the offered gift. But if the gifting player has a lower status rank than the recipient must accept the entire gift. When a recipient accepts a gift, the cards go back to the top of the gifting player's deck, and the recipient takes an equal number of resource tokens and adds them to their matching needs stack or to their reserves. So if any leader cards are offered, they're wild as usual, and the recipient can take whatever resource they like. Forest cards may not be gifted, and they don't help the recipient or gifting player towards meeting needs or gaining status. They're mainly used to disguise how many resources a player may be holding. Each resource accepted as a gift gains the gifting player 2 status. Finally, in step 6, it's time for some reconciling. The first thing to check during this step is to see if any player has failed to meet their needs. If someone didn't meet their needs, then the game ends immediately and all players lose. Assuming that's not the case, now you'll have to decide what to do with your remaining cards, and this happens in status rank order. Each player returns all of their cards to their player mat in exchange for benefits. You can return any number of leader or resource cards to the deck or reserve tokens to the pile for 1 status each. As with gifting, this status gain is 1 comprehensive gain based on the total number of combined cards and tokens, and note that you cannot gain status if you overstretch this turn. You can return any number of cards in exchange for reserve tokens of the same resource matching the cards. However, your total reserves are capped at 9 tokens, and you cannot have more than 4 of any one kind of resource. As usual, leader cards are wild in this case and can be exchanged for any resource token. The other thing that you can do with your leader cards is exchange 2 of them for 1 knowledge card, noting that you may never have 2 of the same card. Knowledge cards are permanent special abilities that the player can acquire for their community over the course of the game. For example, the Showing Off card allows you to gain 6 status as a conservation bonus during step 3 instead of the normal 5. After returning your cards to your deck in exchange for status and other goodies, you'll resolve the new status rank order and give out status awards. The player with the highest status receives the number 1 status rank token, second highest receives number 2, and so on. There should be no ties aside from players potentially at 0 status. In that case, players with more reserve tokens have higher status. If there's still a tie, the player who had the highest status rank earlier in the turn maintains the higher status. After you've determined the new status rank order, it's time to give out status awards. In a 3-player game, first place gets 2 awards and second place gets 1. For games with 4 to 6 players, first place gets 3 awards, second place gets 2, and third place gets 1. If that was turn 8, the game ends. Otherwise, set all players' status markers back to 0, move the turn marker to the next turn, and start back at step 1. Reminder that if a player overstretched their resources in the previous turn, they may flip their cards back to face down, but they will skip step 2 in this turn. Remember that if any player cannot meet their needs during step 6, the game ends immediately and all players lose the game. But if you all make it through to the end of turn 8, then all players survive and win the game for a collective victory. And if one player has more status awards than any other, they are elected as chief amongst all the communities and are granted an additional victory. And that's how you play Wolves. It's also worth noting that each community varies slightly when it comes to resource cards in their corresponding player decks. And if you ever get stuck, the rulebook also includes a helpful summary of the turn steps for easy reference while you play.
Wolves is quite a unique game in its semi-cooperative nature. On one hand, you really have to collaborate with the other players to ensure everyone's needs are met, but on the other hand, you can't ignore the temptation of those sweet status awards, so you'll find yourself making choices to eke ahead of your opponents when it comes to status. Plus, the push your luck aspect of gathering resources adds a nice bit of excitement and risk into the mix, which can be pretty thrilling. And if Wolves seems like a game you'd enjoy, make sure to check out its page on BoardGameGeek.com to learn more. And until next time, I've been Nick Murphy. We are here with Board Game Geek, and that is how you play Wolves. Have a great day.